this not the clockwork universe or what? I mean, literally. I guess the most interesting part about the DXY coming up against the 702 is that it came up against the 702 basically the exact moment that we had all been waiting to hear what the Federal Reserve did with interest rates. And no surprise, they did exactly what they said they were going to do, and everyone was surprised that they did exactly what they said they were going to do. So anyway, dude, all that matters is the confluence of the DXY finding classical resistance. Classical resistance. Look, double top. Like, just doesn't get any more textbook than that. Double top. Right at the 702, this entire thing is a study in basic reality. This entire freaking thing. Because right as this sucker is coming up against the 702, obviously I'm implying that probably signals the reversal. And how many times have I implied that if the DXY is downtrending, well, basically everything else is uptrending. So we've just been coming off of this massive DXY pump, which obviously makes no sense to anybody, right? Oh, what? How does that make sense if we're talking about inflation, right? Obviously. So here's a lesson. Whenever something doesn't make sense, you just need to be patient until it does make sense. So here we are. Things are starting to make sense. The DXY is reversing. We all knew that would happen. There's no way that a bunch of useless pieces of paper can increase in value when they keep making more useless pieces of paper. So as we stand upon this 702 reversal from the DXY, we can be very excited about what's setting up for Bitcoin, and we're very close to our favorite old 702 retracement subject that we've talked about so many times. And that's a beautiful weekly candle to see, especially coming off of like a lot of selling pressure past 3 weeks, a lot of selling pressure, right? It tried, it failed. But now look at that. Look at that. How much you guys want to bet this sucker's going to close over the 0.236? Obviously, that's the point. That's what the message is that the whales are sending. And also, it's the message of the DXY. The message of the DXY is telling you that it's Bitcoin's turn, right? It's the crypto's turn, but it's also the stock market's turn. I mean, we felt that in the stock market as well. Look at this. Look at this weekly freaking candle on the SPY, right? And I've talked about, I think, it's likely that the SPY has topped because of that Fibonacci. But even if it has topped, well, guess what? The sucker's going back to the 702. That's upside all around, right? Oh, like it's the same thing of Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin's going back to the 702. Smaller caps are getting their moments. SPY is going back to the 702. Smaller caps are getting their moments. And we still have to factor in that the Dow Jones, it's basically doing the same, giant weekly reversal candle off of a massive ABC correction. I still don't understand why people thought this thing was going to go deeper. I thought it was pretty clear that it was reversed because literally the news. Can you imagine a bigger, scarier narrative than Russia invading Ukraine? Can you imagine it? That's a real question, because if you can, it is possible that this ABC correction is not done. But just realize this is an ABC correction. It's a wave 4 down. It's coming into a wave 5 up to meet up with the Fibonacci extension here. Going back to 2009, beating the dead horse like we do best. But everything is it's fitting together like clockwork synchronicity, right? We're in wave 5 of 5 of 5 right here for the Dow Jones. I think that corresponds to the SPY getting up to that 702 to finish off its giant head and shoulder reversal structure after it's met up with the top of this Fibonacci extension, which goes back to the financial crisis. Now, one thing that's interesting to address that I haven't talked a lot about as well is the NASDAQ. You know why? It's basically just doing the exact same thing as everything else. As you've probably figured out, the Dow Jones, the NASDAQ, and the SPY and Bitcoin, they're basically all doing the same thing approximately, more or less. So if I'm talking about the SPY exceeding the Fibonacci extension and that's where my, end game thesis is for that, well, the same thing applies to the NASDAQ, and it's just more reinforcement for, tech stocks having upside. That corresponds to cryptos having upside when the greater stock market, which is the Dow Jones, has actually a lot of upside, more upside than the NASDAQ and the SPY. But here's our basic, NASDAQ setup, right? Massive reversal candle. It jumps right out the screen, but obviously sitting atop the Fibonacci extension, right? So this starts to beg an interesting question, right? So the NASDAQ just slammed through the Fibonacci extension, comes back to test it, right? So worst case scenario, obviously, worst case scenario is it's doing a 702 retracement. That aligns with everything, blah, blah, blah. Good news, good news. But I do have to acknowledge a very real alternative scenario that's setting up here that you're going to see why it makes sense in a second here. Because when you have such a clear piercing of this massive Fibonacci structure that goes back a long ways, and then it comes back to test it so clearly, like it comes back to that line, and just look at that. Biggest candle the sucker's seen in like a very, very long time. And that candle is establishing its dominance over that 4.236 extension. It's like, I'm done down there, right? So it's definitely going to the 702. That's for sure. But the bigger question is, are we measuring this thing properly? And this is why I have to bring this back up, because this is interesting. Just interesting, okay? Look at the top of the NASDAQ before the COVID crash stuff started happening. It was the freaking 702. It hit that 702. Look how much earlier, though. Like, what? Did NASDAQ anticipate this stuff, right? This is happening in February. COVID crash stuff happens. Perfect clockwork 702 synchronicity. This is telling us that NASDAQ might have a whole lot more upside, right? It might. Especially because a lot of the upside in altcoins will translate to upside in tech stocks. You know, I can get the technicals of that, or you can probably make sense of it. It's not that complicated. But if all this altcoin stuff I've been talking about is about to pop off, you know, all this new technology from altcoins and blockchains, a lot of the NASDAQ is invested in that very thing. So, you know, I don't think this is something to rule out. But you got to talk about the reality of, if the NASDAQ is all the way the hell up here, well, that means inflation hit like a freaking tidal wave, right? So it might. It might. This is very realistic. This would send the Dow into a more upside. I mean, now you can see why my calculations are relatively conservative, because with the tidal wave of inflation that's basically inevitable, right? We all know it's inevitable. You know, these Fibonacci's, you know, they might... This measurement is basically like if inflation blows off like Mount St. Helens. If that's what happens, then these measurements now come into play, you know? So I'm definitely not there yet. I'm going to definitely keep the conservative approach here. And I do think this 5-wave move is really classic, because the whole mentality shifted right here. What happened off this reversal structure? All of Western monetary policy changed right here. They started printing free money. This is when they did the free money printing and they bail out companies. This is that. So this is a 5-wave move in the sense that the mentality shifted here. People's views on money shifted here. Now it's like, okay, we're going to be shamelessly printing as much money as we possibly can. That's this. Otherwise, you would have had a 3-headed reversal structure, right? Literally. The reason this didn't have a 3-headed reversal structure is because they decided to print money and change the whole game. The whole situation with Bitcoin having a 3-headed reversal structure here, right? This massive one. I know this is like a bleak scenario, but in a way, this price, you know, seeing a $2,500 Bitcoin, you know, that's good news in a lot of ways for inflation, right? That means inflation didn't kill the hell out of us, right? Because all this stuff is relative. So it's not necessarily the greatest situation of all time if Bitcoin just keeps going up. I think the better situation, all things considered, is that Bitcoin does retrace to 702 and then start a massive reversal. That means that people aren't getting killed on inflation, right? But the reality is they might be getting killed on inflation. And if that's the case, then all of our crypto hedges in stock markets, those will go even higher than anyone can even, then our Fibonacci's are like, they're like not even showing us the reality, because the reality is manipulated by an infinite supply of money, right? So if there's an infinite supply of money, well then, you know, that's when Bitcoin goes to, you know, $300,000 and this kind of crazy stuff. So you got to take everything in terms of like, it's great that these markets are going to pump, but it's not great that means that inflation is like literally ridiculous, right? Anyway, on a conservative level, the stars are quite literally aligned, right? You got this big, huge weekly Bitcoin candle. You know, I mean, this is a statement from the whales, especially based on this Fibonacci structure we've talked so much about. You know, the 702 is imminent here. Worst case scenario, the NASDAQ basically doing its own 702 retracement. You know, maybe there's more upside there. Who knows? We'll take it when we get there, but you can see this thing's got strength and it's doing the same retracement basically that Bitcoin's doing. Meanwhile, the Dow Jones is carving out the classic wave 3 within wave 1, right? Look at wave 3, the biggest one. That's within wave 1. So if we zoom in just a little bit, just to go more, Elliott wave technicals and just kind of look what's going on here on a closer level. On Dow Jones, you've got wave 1, wave 2, wave 2 down, almost repeats all of wave 1, right? So it's clearly completed wave 2 down, and look at wave 3 just ripping. Classic. That's what wave 3 does. Wave 3 in all time frames is the one that rips the hardest. So now you've got a wave 3 rip. You're gonna get a pullback. We could see a pullback on Monday all around, and it would make total sense, because if we have a pullback on the Dow Jones on Monday, there's your 4 down. This is all within wave 1, this being wave 1 right here. But you have 4 down within wave 1, comes back to the top of wave 1 and 2 where they intersect. Just test right there. And then you finish it off and you get your wave 5, and that completes wave 1. But that would be kind of confluent with what Bitcoin's doing, because Bitcoin is closing this epic weekly candle right now. So if Bitcoin sells off, at the beginning of this coming week, it starts selling off tomorrow or the next day, well, that almost doesn't really matter, because as you've probably noticed, these candles tend to resolve the opposite of where they start, right? Just like this candle. This candle started way up here. Well, it resolved way down here, right? This candle is resolving. This is the weekly candle. It's resolving above the 0.236. That's a statement. That's a statement from the whales. That's a statement from the people who are moving these markets. The dog whistle is Fibonacci, right? They're saying like, yeah, man, we're revving this sucker up, right? And it's aligning with the stock market. It's aligning with the fact that everyone was worried markets are going to get crushed under interest rate hikes. And then the most reasonable situation occurs where interest rate hikes are exactly what's expected, and the markets do exactly the opposite of what everyone expected them to do based on that news. But if we're looking at Fibonacci's, it's like all that noise means nothing. You see this weekly candle close over the 0.236, and I mean, hold on to your hats, right? Like literally, and stuff's already going. Zcash is slamming right now. What the freaking hell? You remember when I made that video, like, I don't know how, not very long ago, and I was like laughing hysterically that Zcash was under $90. And I was buying it, obviously, like inevitable. And I'm literally holding for this. It's going to tag up here in the 702. You know what I mean? It's going to be maybe volatile on the way up, but I think it's reasonable to sell into the strength that we'll get coming into that 702. But I do think Zcash, these Fibonacci's are going to be, are about coming here. We're right at that moment where these Fibonacci prophecies are about to come to fruition here, and it's going to be volatile on the way up. You know what I mean? It's going to be volatile. So you want to sell into that strength, and you want to buy into that weakness basically the whole way up. Ideally, it's an art form. You're a rhythmic master, right? If you can do that. But Elliott waves help you do that, and of course Fibonacci's give you those clear targets. So, this is a funny chart right here. Total 3, right? So this is upside down. I'm looking at this upside down. So if I measure the entire altcoin market, because that's what this index represents, the entire altcoin market upside down, it's like, it retraced the 702. Looks like I might have got rejected at the 702, and now it's working our way back this way, right? Basically to do an ABC correction, inverted ABC correction. A down, B up to the 702, upside down, and then C the heart wrencher, so there's your upside, right? And look how that just is perfect with the DXY, right? DXY coming against resistance at the 702, right when the inverted altcoin chart comes up against resistance against the 702, coming off of that intersection of the B and the C wave. And now you got C the heart wrencher when C the heart wrencher is working on your side, because we're looking at the chart upside down. Hopefully that makes basic sense. But yeah, it's just a perfect confluence. It's just a great time to be alive, dude. It's a great time to be looking at the charts, dude. It's a great time to be rooting for the upside, and just been holding your altcoins for like what seems like forever, but it's obviously worth it if you see the implications, right? You'll wait as long as it takes, because this stuff is about to pop off like gangbusters. You know what I mean? Like,
Drinks cut down my